Can New York City go bankrupt? New York City. About 22,000 city workers could lose their jobs this fall as New York prepares to slash further a wartime budget to cope with a $9 billion deficit, more than $1 billion more than initially estimated. All city agencies, including the mayor's office, will see layoffs, said Blasio, disappointed that neither federal nor state government came through with a stimulus package or permission to borrow. The US Senate allocated just $1.4 billion to New York City in the $2.2 trillion recovery package passed in March, and government executive Andrew Cuomo nixed last month de Blasio's pleas for borrowing power, arguing the move was fiscally questionable. Cuomo reiterated his hesitancy Wednesday and said his decision would rely on federal stimulus and the economic recovery that could accompany the city's reopening. Budget deficit. City's second wartime executive budget was cut down to $89.3 billion to make room for an estimated $7.4 billion in lost tax revenue. Did not align with a report from the Independent Budget Office report that New York City would lose an estimated 475,000 jobs and up to $9.7 billion. Will it lead New York City to go bankrupt soon? Stay with us to have a full report. Can a big city go bankrupt? It seems improbable that any large city in the world could go bankrupt. However, it happened before, when a bad economy met a city that was over-leveraged and needed money to operate and improve infrastructure. According to experts, it could occur in one of the world's largest cities, as it nearly did in 1975. New York City was on the brink of bankruptcy 4 decades ago. Mayor Abraham Beame had even prepared a statement to announce it. A group of financiers and union leaders pulled together a plan to use union pensions to back loans to the city. An organization called the Municipal Assistance Corporation was formed to help New York as well. Among other things, it convinced banks that held city debt to change maturities in New York's favor and chop some interest rates. The city also made massive layoffs of its workers. How to keep New York City from going bankrupt? With the city's tax base decimated by the pandemic and a high income earner exodus, will Mayor Bill de Blasio tighten the fiscal belt? The dire need for it is laid out in a new Manhattan Institute study. In it, New York City government vet Eric Koba looks at the 2-decade growth of the city payroll and suggests ways to achieve savings and reduce costs in light of the pandemic's toll on city revenues. Since de Blasio became mayor in 2014, the city's payroll and overall spending have mushroomed. At the end of fiscal year 2012, the city headcount was 293,550. By the end of 2019, it reached an all-time high of 326,739. Koba gives de Blasio credit for managing the immediate fiscal challenge, but warns that budget gaps will explode soon if, as is all too likely, the real estate market buckles and property tax revenues crater. He explains that the city's structural dependence on ever-rising property tax revenues leaves it vulnerable to dramatic shifts in the real estate market, such as the likely coming space cutbacks by Manhattan office-based industries. If real estate tax revenue no longer grows well above the rate of inflation, he warns, the city's expenditure patterns will not be sustainable. If the new work-from-home reality proves permanent for many workers, he recommends trimming the city's headcount down to levels of 2008, 311,000, in order to reduce the high tax burden and to leave more money in the hands of residents and businesses. Plus, it will trim the high-cost future of retirement-based benefits. De Blasio has so far resisted any real cutbacks or layoffs, pinning all his hopes on a huge windfall Washington probably will never send. But even that wouldn't fix the long-term problem. New York City is spending far too much for its post-pandemic tax base. The crows won't really come home to roost until this mayor is out of office. But the city desperately needs a successor to be a leader willing to face harsh reality. What's the plan? The argument that New York is in profound trouble was laid out recently in the New York Post. Peter C. Earle, an economist at the American Institute of Economic Research, was quoted, "New York City could go bankrupt, absolutely. Several things would need to happen at once, and some of them already have begun. Among other things, New York State is one of the states where Americans pay the most taxes. Mayor Bill de Blasio plans to add $3 billion to a budget that is already $89.2 billion. That means the city deficit will rise substantially. Spending by the city is up to about $40 billion since he took office. Next, New York City's property taxes continue to rise. This puts pressure both on businesses and individuals. This is another incentive for both the wealthy and companies to leave the city for less tax burdened locations. Added to that, New York State is among those where people have the highest sales taxes. Finally, as part of the formula that could wreck New York's finances, the top 1% of the city's wealthy based on earnings are half the city's tax base. New York City's independent budget office confirmed those numbers recently. The most recent bankruptcy of a large American city was Detroit's in 2013. The city ran into a cash flow problem. There are, however, significant differences between New York and Detroit, as it was 6 years ago. Detroit's population plunged over the decades from the 1960s through 2010. That by itself undermined the city's tax base. Will New York City's finances unravel in the next several years? If there is another deep recession and the city continues to lose its wealthiest residents, it could well fall into extremely deep financial trouble. Drop a comment down below what you think. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to get updates about future uploads. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.